He said intimacy wasn't owed, so I stopped paying him in affection. No more stolen glances. No more whispered promises. Just the icy silence of a woman who's learned her worth. Now he sleeps alone, drowning in regret, while I glow in the warmth of someone who understands reciprocity. Karma's embrace feels sweeter than his ever did. You're not worthy of me, Hannah. You never were. Greg said it while buttering his toast, casual as discussing the weather. I stood frozen at the kitchen counter, coffee mug halfway to my lips, certain I'd misheard. 23 years of marriage, and my husband had just delivered the cruelest words with the same tone he used to ask about dinner plans. Excuse me. I set the mug down carefully, my hands already trembling. He didn't look up from his breakfast. You heard me. I've been thinking about it for months. You're just not on my level anymore. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the morning light too bright. I waited for the punchline, the sheepish grin that would tell me this was some twisted joke. Instead, Greg took another bite of toast and scrolled through his phone like he'd just commented on traffic. Greg, what are you saying? Now he looked at me. His eyes held no warmth, no recognition of the woman who'd stood beside him at the altar, who'd raised his children, who'd believed in us when everyone else said we were too young to make it work. I'm saying exactly what I said. You're not worthy of me. The words hung in the air between us. I felt something shift inside my chest like a door slamming shut. This wasn't anger talking or stress from work. This was calculated. Deliberate. Where is this coming from? My voice sounded smaller than I intended. It's been coming for years. I just finally said it out loud. He stood straightening his tie. I have a meeting. Don't wait up tonight. He left me standing there, surrounded by the remnants of what I'd thought was our normal Tuesday morning. The coffee grew cold in my hands. The toast he'd abandoned sat half-eaten on his plate, butter congealing at the edges. That night he came home after midnight. I pretended to sleep when he slipped into bed, but I felt him turn away from me, creating an invisible wall down the middle of our mattress. The insults came in waves after that. Not screaming matches or dramatic confrontations, but quiet cruelties dropped into ordinary moments. I didn't even want to choose you, he said one morning as I handed him his coffee, steam still rising from the mug I'd prepared exactly how he liked it for over 2 decades. I blinked slowly. What do you mean? Back then, when we got engaged, you were just available. Available. Like a parking space or a lunch special. I poured my own coffee with steady hands, though my heart was racing. Then why did you marry me? Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Each cruel comment was delivered with the same detached tone, as if he were reading grocery lists aloud. When I asked why he was working late again, he answered without looking up from his laptop. You're not fit for my bed anyway. The words stung more than if he'd slapped me. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. 45 years old, laugh lines around my eyes, silver threads weaving through my brown hair. When had I become someone unworthy of love? I started shrinking. Not physically, but in every other way that mattered. My voice grew quieter at dinner. I stopped reaching for his hand during movies. I canceled lunch plans with friends, claiming fatigue when they asked if everything was okay. Just tired, became my standard response to everyone's concerned looks. It was easier than explaining that my husband had turned into a stranger who seemed to take pleasure in dismantling my self-worth one comment at a time. The changes in Greg were subtle at first. A new cologne that made him smell like someone I didn't recognize. Late-night gym sessions that had him coming home energized rather than exhausted. Phone calls he took in the garage, speaking in hushed tones that carried a warmth he no longer used with me. I found the movie ticket stub by accident, tucked into his jacket pocket when I was gathering laundry. The Time Traveler's Wife. A romantic drama he'd refused to see with me, claiming it looked boring. The ticket was dated from the previous Thursday, when he'd said he was working late. My hands shook as I held the small piece of paper. Someone had watched that movie with my husband. Someone who wasn't me. The gym obsession made sense now. Greg had started coming home with his hair still damp from the shower, his skin flushed with exercise. Or so I'd thought. He bought new clothes, tighter shirts that showed off muscles I hadn't noticed him building. He hummed in the mornings, a lightness in his step that had been missing from our house for months. The truth crashed into me on a random Wednesday evening. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard Greg's voice floating up from the kitchen below. He was on the phone, but his tone was different. Playful. You're the only one who really understands me, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you. Sarah. I knew that name. Sarah from his office, the new marketing coordinator who was barely older than our daughter. The one who'd sent him a congratulations card when he got his promotion, signed with a heart instead of her last name. I crept to the top of the stairs, each step careful and silent. His voice drifted up clearly now, warm and affectionate in a way it hadn't been with me in years. I wish I could just leave all this behind and start fresh with you. You make everything feel possible again. The laundry basket slipped from my numb fingers, clean clothes tumbling down the stairs in a silent cascade. I sat heavily on the top step, surrounded by the scattered remnants of the life I'd been trying so hard to hold together. Everything made sense now. The cruelty wasn't random, it was purposeful. Greg wasn't just falling out of love with me. He was actively pushing me away, tearing me down to justify what he was already doing behind my back. 23 years of marriage and I'd become the obstacle standing between my husband and his fresh start. The receipt fell out of his wallet like a confession. Chez Laurent, the French restaurant 2 towns over that we talked about visiting for our anniversary 3 years running. Candlelit dinner for 2, wine pairing included. Last Saturday night while I'd sat home watching Netflix with a frozen dinner. I held the small piece of paper between my fingers, studying the elegant script and the total that could have covered our grocery bill for a week. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., well past the quick work dinner he'd claimed to attend. The front door opened as I folded the receipt and slipped it into my pocket. Greg's footsteps moved through the hallway with unusual lightness, almost a bounce. I arranged myself on the living room couch, turning the page of a magazine I wasn't reading. Hey, he said, loosening his tie. You're up late. Couldn't sleep. I kept my voice neutral, conversational. How was your evening? Boring client meeting. You know how it is. He moved toward the stairs without meeting my eyes. I'm beat. Heading up. I nodded and turned another page. I ate already. There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry. Thanks, but I grabbed something earlier. As you did. At Chez Laurent. With someone who wasn't your wife. I sat in that living room until nearly 2 in the morning, not moving, barely breathing. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, but everything felt different now. The family photos on the mantel seemed to mock me. The wedding picture in the silver frame showed 2 people I no longer recognized. When I finally went upstairs, Greg was already asleep, turned away from my side of the bed. I slipped under the covers and stared at the ceiling, making a decision that would change everything. The next morning I didn't make his coffee. It was such a small thing, but after 23 years of starting every day by preparing his cup exactly the way he liked it, 2 sugars, splash of cream, my hands felt strange and empty at 6:30 a.m. I made my own coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching him stumble around looking for his usual morning routine. Where's my coffee? He asked, rifling through cabinets. Coffee maker's right there. I didn't look up from my newspaper. He stared at me for a moment, then shrugged and made his own. It was too strong, I could tell from his expression, but he didn't complain. That afternoon I cleaned out his briefcase to return some files he'd forgotten. Inside was the handwritten note I'd tucked in there Monday morning. Hope your presentation goes well today. Love you. H. It was still folded exactly as I'd left it, unread and ignored. I threw it in the trash without a second thought. No more love notes. No more caring text messages asking about his day. No more special touches like folding his shirts the way his mother had taught me, with the perfect creases he preferred. No more of the 1,000 tiny gestures that had built our marriage one thoughtful moment at a time. Instead, I became a polite stranger sharing his house. The change was immediate. When Greg came home that evening, he glanced around the kitchen with confusion. His shirts hung in the closet, wrinkled from the dryer. His favorite coffee mug sat dirty in the sink. The dinner I'd prepared was portioned for one. Did you eat? He asked. Yes. There's sandwich stuff in the fridge if you want something. He made himself a sandwich with the enthusiasm of a man performing a chore. We ate in silence, him scrolling through his phone while I read a book. When he finished, he left his plate on the table and wandered into the living room. For weeks, this became our new normal. Greg seemed almost relieved by my emotional absence. He came and went without explanation, staying late at work without me questioning his schedule. He answered personal calls at the dinner table, speaking in low tones while I pretended to focus on my food. The strange part was how comfortable he became with my silence. It was as if my lack of attention gave him permission to stop pretending entirely. He started taking calls in the kitchen while I was cooking, apparently forgetting I could hear every word. His voice took on that same warm tone I'd heard the night I discovered Sarah's name. "I miss you too," he whispered into the phone one Tuesday evening, thinking I was upstairs folding laundry. "This weekend can't come fast enough." I stood perfectly still in the hallway, holding my breath. No, she won't notice. She's been completely checked out lately. It's like I'm invisible to her. Invisible. The irony was almost funny. Greg thought my silence meant I wasn't paying attention when in reality, I was watching everything with crystal clarity. That's when the idea formed. If he truly believed I was invisible, then I could observe without being detected. I could listen without him guarding his words. I could learn exactly what my husband was hiding because he no longer considered me a threat worth concealing from. The next day I bought a small notebook from the drugstore. Nothing fancy, just a simple spiral-bound pad that fit easily in my purse. That evening I wrote my first entry. Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. Phone call in kitchen. "I miss you too. Mentioned weekend plans. Thinks I'm checked out." It felt strange, documenting my own life like a detective investigating a crime. But with each entry, something inside me shifted. The helpless woman who'd been torn down by cruel words was transforming into someone methodical, purposeful. Someone who refused to be invisible any longer. Greg continued his phone calls, his unexplained absences, his casual cruelties. But now I had a record. Dates, times, exact phrases. Not just what he was doing but how it made me feel. The notebook became my witness, my proof that I wasn't imagining the systematic destruction of our marriage. By the end of the first week, I had filled 12 pages with his careless confessions. By the end of the month, I realized I wasn't just documenting his betrayal anymore. I was building a case. The notebook felt too fragile, too temporary. Paper could tear, ink could fade, and words could be dismissed as fiction. I needed something more permanent, something undeniable that would speak louder than my voice ever could. The shoebox came from my closet's top shelf, dusty and forgotten behind old Christmas decorations. It had once held my favorite boots, the ones I'd worn on our first anniversary dinner, when Greg still looked at me like I hung the moon. Now it would serve a different purpose entirely. I started with the love notes, though finding them required an archaeological dig through our house. The first one I discovered was crumpled in the back of his sock drawer, a birthday card I'd written 3 years ago, complete with inside jokes and promises of many more adventures together. The envelope was still sealed. In his briefcase I found 2 more notes tucked behind old business cards and expired insurance information. One was from Valentine's Day, decorated with little hearts I'd drawn during my lunch break. The other was a simple "thinking of you" message I'd slipped in before his big presentation last fall. Both showed clear signs of being handled exactly once when I'd placed them there. Each unread note felt like a small betrayal, but together they painted a devastating picture. Here was concrete proof of how long he'd been pulling away, how many attempts at connection he'd simply ignored. I smoothed each one carefully and placed them in the box like evidence in a trial. The receipts required more detective work. Greg had always been meticulous about his finances, keeping every scrap of paper for taxes, he claimed. I'd mocked him gently over the years for his organized filing system. Now I was grateful for his obsessive record-keeping. The hotel receipt from Boston made my hands shake. Business conference, he'd told me, though I'd later learned from his assistant that the company had sent no one to Boston that weekend. The room was booked for 2 nights, with charges for room service and spa treatments I knew Greg would never indulge in alone. A jewelry store receipt followed, $300 spent on something I'd never seen. The date coincided perfectly with what he'd claimed was a guy's poker night. I'd waited up for him that evening, wearing the new nightgown I'd bought specifically for his return. He'd come home after midnight, exhausted and uninterested, claiming the game had run late. The restaurant receipts told their own story. Intimate dinners at places I'd mentioned wanting to try, wine pairings for 2, desserts ordered for romantic sharing. Each receipt was dated during my book club meetings, my yoga classes, or evenings when I'd been visiting my mother. Greg had been living a parallel life, taking another woman to all the places we'd planned to go together. But it was his phone that provided the most damaging evidence. Greg had always been careless with technology. He'd leave his device charging in the kitchen while he showered, never thinking to clear his notifications. Sarah's messages appeared on his lock screen like confessions, and photographing them became my evening routine. "Can't wait for our weekend getaway," appeared the Tuesday before he'd claimed to have a fishing trip with his college buddies. "You make me feel like a teenager again," showed up during the same week he told me I was exhausting to be around. The most painful screenshot showed their conversation about me. Sarah had apparently asked about his home life, and Greg's response was brutal in its casual cruelty. "Hannah's basically checked out. She doesn't even notice when I'm gone anymore. It's like living with a roommate who pays half the mortgage." Sarah's reply was worse. "Poor thing probably knows deep down. Women always do. At least she's making this easy for you." I printed each screenshot on our home printer, the same machine I'd used for years to print family photos and school permission slips. The mundane task of formatting the images, adjusting brightness and contrast felt surreal. Here I was, preparing evidence of my husband's betrayal with the same care I'd once used to create photo albums of our vacations. But the recordings were what truly completed the collection. It started accidentally. I'd been voice texting a friend when Greg launched into one of his casual cruelties. "You're not cut out for this kind of lifestyle anymore, Hannah," his voice captured clearly in the background. "Maybe you should find something more your speed." After that, I began keeping my phone within reach during our conversations. Not obviously recording, just positioned strategically where it could capture his words. Modern phones were sensitive enough to pick up clear audio from across a room. "I don't know why I ever thought you could handle being married to someone with ambition," came through crystal clear from the evening he'd criticized my job as a school librarian. "Some people are just meant for smaller lives. You've really let yourself go, haven't you?" was captured during what I'd hoped would be a peaceful Saturday morning. "I remember when you used to take pride in your appearance." Each recording was dated and labeled in my phone's voice memo app. Greg's voice, speaking words that would horrify anyone who heard them, preserved in digital perfection. There was no way to claim these were taken out of context or exaggerated through emotional memory. His own voice condemned him. The box filled slowly but steadily over 6 weeks. Love notes proving my efforts to save our marriage. Receipts documenting his financial betrayal. Screenshots revealing his emotional affair. Recordings capturing his psychological cruelty. Each item was arranged chronologically, creating a timeline that told the complete story of our marriage's death. Not the sudden collapse Greg seemed to believe it was, but a systematic execution he'd been carrying out for months, maybe years. I sealed the box with packing tape and wrote a single word on the lid: truth. It sat in my closet like a time bomb, waiting for the right moment to explode Greg's carefully constructed narrative. He told me I wasn't worthy of him, but this box proved something entirely different. It proved he wasn't worthy of the woman I'd been, or the dignity I was finally ready to reclaim. The phone call from Greg's sister came on a Thursday afternoon while I was reorganizing the linen closet, a task I'd been putting off for months but suddenly felt urgent. "Hannah, honey, is everything all right with you and Greg?" Linda's voice carried genuine concern. "You seemed so withdrawn at Mom's birthday last month. We barely heard you speak." I paused, folding a fitted sheet with mechanical precision. "Everything's fine, Linda. Just tired, you know." "It's more than tired. You used to light up the room at family gatherings. Now you barely make eye contact with anyone." She hesitated. "Greg seems fine, but you're like a ghost of yourself." The sheet crumpled in my hands. "Maybe we should have everyone over for dinner soon. It's been too long since we hosted." "That would be wonderful. Are you sure you're up for it?" "Absolutely. This weekend work for everyone." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Linda was right. I'd become a shadow of who I used to be. But that was about to change. Saturday morning, I drove to the farmer's market for the first time in months. I selected ingredients like I was planning a celebration. Fresh rosemary for the roasted chicken, heirloom tomatoes for the caprese salad, Greg's mother's favorite wine from the local vineyard. Everything had to be perfect. The house smelled like home when the family arrived that evening. Greg's parents came first, his mother carrying flowers from her garden and his father asking about my job with genuine interest, something Greg hadn't done in years. Linda arrived with her husband and teenage daughter, followed by Greg's adult children from his first marriage, who still called me their bonus mom despite everything. I set the dining room table with our wedding china, the good silverware, and the crystal glasses we saved for special occasions. Candles flickered across the white tablecloth, casting warm shadows that made everything look softer, more forgiving. Greg seemed surprised by the effort I'd put in. "This looks incredible, Hannah. What's the occasion?" "Family," I said simply. "We don't need more reason than that." Dinner conversation flowed easily at first. Greg's daughter talked about her new job, his son shared updates about his upcoming wedding, and Linda entertained everyone with stories from her recent vacation. I moved between kitchen and dining room, playing the perfect hostess while the box waited upstairs like a loaded weapon. The apple pie I'd made from scratch drew appreciative murmurs. Greg's mother complimented the flaky crust, asking for my secret. "Just lots of practice," I replied, though I wanted to add that 23 years of trying to perfect everything for her son had taught me many skills. As coffee was poured and second helpings of dessert distributed, I excused myself. "I'll be right back. There's something I need to share with everyone." The box felt heavier than I remembered as I carried it downstairs. Conversations quieted when I re-entered the dining room, everyone's attention drawn to the simple cardboard container I placed deliberately in the center of the table. "I've been quiet lately," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "Linda noticed it and I'm sure others have too. I think it's time you all understood why." Greg's fork clinked against his dessert plate. "Hannah, what is this?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I looked around the table at faces I'd grown to love over more than 2 decades. "Greg has made it very clear that I'm not worthy of him anymore." I thought you should hear it in his own words. The silence stretched uncomfortably as I opened the box and began distributing its contents. Love notes went to his mother, who read them with growing confusion. "These are beautiful, Hannah. Why would you throw these away, Greg?" "I didn't throw them away," I said quietly. "He never read them." The hotel receipt went to Linda, whose eyebrows rose as she processed the dates and charges. "Boston? But you told me you were home that weekend helping Hannah with her garden." Greg's face had gone pale. "You went through my personal papers? Your filing cabinet. The one you asked me to organize last month." I placed a screenshot in front of his father. "This is from your phone. I didn't hack anything. These messages appeared on your lock screen while you were charging it in the kitchen." His father adjusted his reading glasses, studying the text conversation with Sarah. The room grew impossibly quiet as he read Greg's complaints about me, his plans for romantic weekends, his casual dismissal of our marriage. "Who is Sarah?" his mother asked, her voice small. "My coworker," Greg said through gritted teeth. "This is all taken out of context." Context? I pulled out my phone and played the first recording. Greg's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "You're not cut out for this kind of lifestyle anymore, Hannah. Maybe you should find something more your speed." His daughter's face crumpled. "Dad, how could you talk to her like that?" "You don't understand the situation," Greg began, but I played another recording. "I don't know why I ever thought you could handle being married to someone with ambition. Some people are just meant for smaller lives." Greg's son pushed back from the table. "Stop. Just stop talking." But I wasn't finished. More screenshots emerged, more receipts, more evidence of a double life carefully hidden from everyone in this room. His family read and listened with growing horror, each piece of evidence shifting their understanding of who Greg really was. "Sarah," Linda whispered, reading one of the messages. 25 years old? Greg, she's younger than your daughter." The air in the room had changed completely. Where warmth and family love had filled the space an hour ago, now there was only shocked silence and the weight of revealed truth. Every eye that had been on me when I started speaking had turned to Greg. His mother set down her coffee cup with a trembling hand. "Gregory, what have you done?" "You're all overreacting," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Marriages go through rough patches. This doesn't mean dash." "Rough patches don't include telling your wife she's worthless," his father interrupted, something I'd never heard him do before. "Rough patches don't include secret hotel rooms and jewelry for other women." The candles continued to flicker, but their warmth had vanished. The beautiful dinner I'd prepared felt like the last meal before an execution. And for the first time in months, I wasn't the one standing trial. The line had been drawn just as I'd hoped. But this time I wasn't standing alone on one side of it. The ride home from dinner was silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt and Greg's labored breathing beside me. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white, and twice he started to speak before stopping himself. I stared out the passenger window, watching familiar streets blur past, feeling oddly calm for the first time in months. When we pulled into our driveway, Greg sat motionless for a long moment after turning off the engine. The porch light illuminated the front door we'd walked through together thousands of times, but tonight it felt like the entrance to a stranger's house. "Hannah." His voice was hoarse. "We need to talk about what just happened." "Do we?" I stepped out of the car without waiting for his answer. Inside, I went straight to the kitchen and began loading the dishwasher with the same methodical precision I'd used to organize the memory box. Greg hovered in the doorway, still wearing his dinner jacket, looking displaced in his own home. "You've been planning this," he said. "All of it." The silence, the distance, collecting evidence like some kind of detective. I rinsed a wine glass carefully before placing it in the rack. "I've been surviving." "This is insane, Hannah. Families have disagreements, but what you did tonight..." "What I did tonight was tell the truth." I faced him directly. "Your truth. In your own words." He ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he'd made when our children were young and caught in lies. "You've turned my entire family against me." "I didn't turn anyone against you, Greg. I simply showed them who you've become." The sound of his footsteps on the stairs echoed through the house as he went to pack. I continued cleaning, wiping down counters that were already spotless, organizing spice jars that didn't need organizing. Anything to keep my hands busy while he moved around upstairs, opening drawers and closets. 30 minutes later, he appeared in the kitchen with a leather overnight bag, the same one he'd used for all those mysterious business trips. "How fitting. I'll be staying at the downtown hotel for now," he said as if I'd asked. "We can figure out the rest later." I nodded without looking up from the already clean stovetop. "Your toothbrush is on the bathroom counter. You forgot it." He stared at me for a moment, perhaps waiting for tears or pleas for him to stay. When neither came, he retrieved the toothbrush and returned to the kitchen. "This doesn't have to be the end, you know," he said quietly. "People work through these things. Some people do." I finally met his eyes. "But those people don't tell their spouses they're unworthy. They don't spend months systematically destroying their partner's self-worth while carrying on with someone half their age." His phone buzzed. Even now, even during this conversation, he glanced at it automatically. "Old habits." "Sarah?" I asked. The color drained from his face. "Hannah." "Save it. I don't actually want to know." He left through the front door without ceremony, no dramatic slams or final words. Just the quiet click of the lock and the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway. I stood in our kitchen, my kitchen now, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The calls started the next morning. Linda was first, her voice shaky with emotion. "Hannah, I've been up all night thinking about everything. Mark and I talked until 3 a.m. and we've decided Greg won't be welcome at our daughter's wedding next month. I can't have someone who treats family like that standing up at the altar talking about love and commitment." "Linda, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. What he did to you, what he said about you, that's not the brother I thought I knew. I'm sorry it took seeing evidence to believe it." Greg's mother called an hour later. "Dear, I wanted you to know how grateful I am that you showed us the truth. I raised that boy to respect women, to honor his commitments. Somewhere along the way I failed." "You didn't fail, Margaret. People make their own choices." "I keep thinking about all those love notes you wrote him. 23 years of love notes, and he couldn't be bothered to read them." Her voice broke slightly. "You deserved so much better." The text messages came throughout the week. "Greg's daughter. I'm ashamed of him. You'll always be my bonus mom." His son, called Dad, went straight to voicemail. "Don't think I'll be trying again anytime soon." But it was Greg's own phone records that provided the most telling epilogue. Through mutual friends, I learned that Sarah had stopped answering his calls within days of the dinner. Whether she'd heard about the family confrontation or simply realized that a man who could betray a 23-year marriage might eventually betray her too, the result was the same. Greg's exciting new romance had evaporated as quickly as it had begun. The memory box stayed on my closet shelf, sealed and untouched. Not as a weapon waiting to be deployed again, but as a reminder of my own strength. Every morning when I dressed for work, I could see it there, proof that I'd refused to accept being diminished, that I'd chosen truth over comfortable lies. Months later, I ran into Greg at the grocery store. He was in the produce section, standing before the Apple display with a confused expression, as if he'd forgotten what he'd come to buy. His cart held the basics of a man living alone. Frozen dinners, instant coffee, a single banana. He looked older, smaller somehow. The confident stride that had once carried him through rooms full of admirers was gone, replaced by the hesitant movements of someone who'd lost his audience. Our eyes met across the store. He opened his mouth as if to speak, perhaps to apologize or explain or ask for forgiveness. But then his gaze shifted to my cart. Fresh flowers, ingredients for a dinner party I was hosting that weekend, wine to share with friends who valued my company, and something in his expression changed. He turned away without a word. I finished my shopping and walked to my car, feeling the afternoon sun warm on my face. As I drove home, I caught myself smiling in the rearview mirror. Not because Greg looked broken, but because I looked whole. For the first time in months, I recognized the woman staring back at me. Sometimes the greatest love story is learning to love yourself again. Which moment touched your heart most? Hannah's quiet strength or her final smile of freedom? Share your thoughts below, and if this story reminded you of your own worth, please like and subscribe for more tales of courage and self-discovery.